Thank you, Holland. That was Holland Hopson, and he'll be back to play more for us later. Welcome to the launch of AGNI 93. This is now the third issue that we've had to launch virtually. But there is a side to this that we're loving, which is we get to invite readers who couldn't necessarily be in Boston, and they can be introduced by our editors who are all across the country themselves. So there are a lot of benefits for us, and the crowd here tonight is another. So thank you for being with us. We have Erin Adair-Hodges, Rafael Campo, Megan Mayhew Bergman, W.S. Piero, and Jamie Figueroa reading tonight. They will each be introduced by someone at the magazine who felt a particular connection with their work. It was a great discussion to hear from everybody about the introductions, because there were, some little tussles about that, the chance to introduce these writers. We've worked with them. They're all in this current issue, this brand new issue. And it's worth saying that the new issue, because of the pandemic and the way in which publishers are now pouring books out for this next season, the printer is delayed, or all printers essentially across the country are delayed. The issue itself will not be in our hands until about the 4th of June, which is by a month the latest ever. But that is the proof of the cover, and we're very happy to be launching it here today. It's also launching online, portions that are going to be available there. We have two other things that I want to mention about tonight before I hand it over. The one is that we will have a video from Deepaj Raman, who may well be in the audience right now. It's 4:30 in the morning where she is in New Delhi, so she prepared her part of this ahead of time for us. It's wonderful. And we'll also have a musical interlude. Holland Hopson will come back and play more for us. In fact, he will bring in the full range of what he does, which is banjo plus. So enjoy the evening. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Jessica Stark. I'm one of the poetry editors here at AGNI, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our first reader, Erin Adair-Hodges, who won the 2016 Agnes Lynch Starr Prize for her poetry collection, Let's All Die Happy, published by the University of Pittsburgh Press in 2017. She's an assistant professor of creative writing at the University of Central Missouri, as well as a co-editor of Pleiades. Erin's poem Extinction, featured in AGNI 93, pulled me in with a scene of residual violence, but not in an essence to reinstate harm or to reanimate a sense of masculine taking that's become such a familiar cast in Hollywood films, in pop media, in our daily diet of what it means to have and protect a woman's body. Instead, Extinction for me lays bare a type of intentional eclipsing of the male gaze. In this poem, I read anesthetized metaphor and violent coercion as questioned, doubted, and perhaps even made endangered by this speaker's voice. I welcome that voice into this world, and relatedly, I warmly welcome to the virtual stage, Erin Adair-Hodges.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Thanks to Bill and Sven and everyone who had their hands on AGNI. I have to admit, I'm a little bit in awe of not only the people who are reading and performing tonight, but the editorial staff and everyone in the crowd. I'm thrilled to be a part of this event and to be on a Zoom that is not a departmental meeting about reorganization or budget. Like, it's thrilling to be here to celebrate with you all wherever you're at. I have two poems tonight. The first, which is Extinction, that just referenced, and then another. Again, thank you. Extinction. The class president pinned me to the inside of the Ford pickup's door. There is a price to be paid for even the heated no. Your fish birth heralds the drought. Your blue eye sees only trees. It is possible that it is not wanting that is wrong, but rather wanting what is wrong, that all songs are about. This is a song too, how it seeks to mirror the rhythms of life and also, like life, must end. But before that, who knows? Consider the megalodon, long extinct forebear to sharks whose fossilized teeth were mistaken for the black tongues of dragons. I'm saying people will think what they want, but the megalodon doesn't want to be a metaphor. It wants ocean's blood. Most days, I make a list of who I'd kill if I had to. Then I redefine had to. These are both from my hopefully forthcoming second collection called Hysterical, which will be out. We'll see. But again, thank you for giving me this space to share. My new boss has been thinking a lot about time, though he doesn't say exactly what this thinking is about. He strokes his beard, a clock his face has made, his right leg lifted to harass the chair, his left on the floor, pulpited flamingo in tweed. He tells me to relax. And maybe it's because of the authoritative way he can grow hair under his nose, but this command works like a cauldroned incantation. I'm so relaxed. It's as if I never have too thought about time, about the frenzied hours trying to settle my son's dervishing, begging the languageless to take my breast so we could be done, and I could get back to the work which would not wait. I'm so relaxed, I don't remember how that son now tells me 7 was the worst year, because that was the year I left to find a job, how the time difference meant there were days we could not talk at all. I pack the picture books he has outgrown into cardboard boxes I label for some future hymn's nostalgic need for bears on quests, their orphaned hunts for hats and homes and sleep. My mother never saved such things. She thought I'd want to forget those years. Sometimes what has happened never stops happening. Even now, this windowed conference room smell of toner, the tea let out to stale, our old disappointments dandruff the air, a thought scrum of hurt. I'm so relaxed though, I can finally be kind. So I cradle my boss, sing him a lullaby until he burbles with joy. I could do anything to his soft body. From a distance, this looks like mercy, a freckled boy cradling the broken bird, his stone set loose from the sky. The woods outside applaud. They have been waiting for the man in me to come home. Another's blood the key. The violence of time, the door. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Erin. I have chills. Hi, folks. I'm Jenny George, and it is a real honor for me to introduce Rafael Campo tonight. And with my time, I thought I would just tell the brief story of how I met Rafael, since it's somewhat atypical for the literary world. I was 6 years old, growing up in Amherst, Massachusetts, where my father was a professor of neuroscience at Amherst College. And Rafael Campo was an undergraduate at Amherst and a pre-med neuroscience major and one of my dad's students. And once, Rafael Campo came over to my house and he cooked dinner. And what he made was a delicious Cuban braised beef dish. And he explained to me that the name of the dish translated into English was old clothes, because the meat was shredded into these soft strings like rags or cloth. And this is such a succulent memory for me, because not only was Rafael Campo a fascinating young man, and the food was delicious, was also an early introduction to metaphor for me, because here was this dish which was clothes, but you could eat it. It was meat, but it was rags. it's such a potent memory for me. And I think of it as a kind of proto-poet moment, because here this metaphor was literally being cooked up in my kitchen. And so now over these last 30 years, when I see a book by Rafael Campo in the bookstore, I don't just think this person is the author of 8 books, a Lambda winner, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, a practicing physician. I also think that guy came to my house and cooked old clothes. So it's a real pleasure to turn the Zoom microphone over to Rafael Campo to read his poems. And Rafael, since you haven't seen me in a while, I just want to say thank you for your work and for joining us this evening. And thank you for making me dinner in 1983.
Thank you so much, Jenny. What a lovely introduction. And if I had any small part in your becoming such an extraordinary poet, I'm just delighted. And yes, the old clothes memory is really strong for me too. And it's one of my favorite dishes, even as I strive these days to overcome my Cuban predilection for foods that are fried twice or come from more than one animal source in the effort to improve my cholesterol numbers. So again, wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us this evening. And thank you so much for this opportunity to be part of this extraordinary reading and this wonderful issue of Agni. So I have 3 poems to share tonight. And the first is entitled The Book of 100,000 Whys. And I spend most of my days at my day job as a doc at this sort of fraught intersection between science and wonder, data and suffering. And I always feel that my physicians' attempt to explicate what I see my patients enduring often really falls short. And so I then come home at night and write poems to try to be present again at the sort of the wonder and the suffering and the dignity of my patients. So this first poem, I think, in some sense, is about that tension, if you will, between our attempts to explain and how poetry and art help us actually to know. The Book of 100,000 Whys. Each night another page. A crystal formed from sugar water. Photosynthesis created oxygen from sunlight. How, like pain or anger, something could be made from nothing. While they read to me, the dark side of the moon would spread until no face was left. I learned to be invisible, reduced to muck by the industrious bacteria inside of us. I guessed we all would die someday. The bird whose song could be decoded, chimpanzees intelligent enough to fashion tools, even my girlish body, soon to be the man my mirror spurned. I drifted off upon the puzzle of the bumblebee, too heavy to be carried by its wings. I dreamed instead I was the weightless wasp, the hungry maggot turning into me. In these quarantine moments, I think poetry can help us to sort of transcend constrained spaces, and this next poem, I hope, helps to do that in some ways. It's called Blue. I look out across the blue hills, which don't look all that blue, really. It's muggy and hot, even up here, and I start thinking that blue was really blue back in my childhood in South America. The sky was so blue, it was like a precious gemstone stolen from a Mayan prince's tomb. Then we moved up north to New England, and the first blue eyes I saw almost made me cry. They seemed so unimaginably beautiful, cool and clear like an alpine lake. Except I didn't know how blue an alpine lake really is until I visited Switzerland with my high school marching band. I've never felt so far away as I did peering into Lake Lucerne. Before then, I'd only seen blue lakes like that in paintings in the museum. I'd go to study in the Isabella Stewart Gardner when I became a medical student, and it seemed I might not see the light of day ever again. On call alone at night in my blue scrubs, I'd listen to Billie Holiday in my bunk with my headphones, sing like an ambulance. Blue is more blue in its absence, in the depths of sadness. All these years later, one of my patients who has AIDS tell me he used to come to the Blue Hills and have sex with strangers on the trails. He liked guys in blue jeans who didn't say much. I look out across the Blue Hills now, and they seem to go on and on. They are the color of forever. And this last poem is a very new one, which is another response, I suppose, to this current pandemic in the midst of others. Viruses. It was late, and I was wheeling the gurney to the ICU. Another sorry faggot dying. They say that viruses aren't living things, I remember thinking. I remember thinking that the crust around his mouth looked thick as toothpaste. I felt helpless as the night kept not ending, as the ER paged me, saying I had another one down there still waiting for me. It was late when we heard the news about the virus spreading in a part of China I'd never heard of, a city of 10 million that I didn't know existed. We'd brushed our teeth together, side by side. You were asleep already, handsome and warm in the darkness, still breathing, still alive. They say the virus is a pathogen that no one's ever seen before. I gaze out from our window at the gaping hole that it takes me a second to remember is just the moon. It feels like the absence of countless souls. It's late. I'm thinking now about my patient in the ICU, racked with fever, how hard it is to die like that, alone. How hard it is to remember.
Good evening. I'm Sven Burkerts. I co-edit AGNI with Bill Pierce, and it's for me a special pleasure, not just a pleasure, but a special pleasure to introduce Megan Mayhew Bergman, who my autocorrect insists on calling Megan Mayhem Bergman, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I wish I could speak very quickly to say, all the many things I'd like to say about Megan, but I can't and I won't. I've admired her since, I think, well before 2014, but that was the year AGNI published Romaine Remains, a wonderful story in an issue. And then a few years had to go by, and then suddenly Megan and I were working together. She was my associate director at the Bennington Writing Seminars, and just a spirit that I learned, a true spirit, a wonderful spirit. And since that time, since we have departed from there, she has emerged as a very impressive and very skilled, both a writer on the natural world and the environment, but also as a, vigorous advocate for those causes. And you'll see animals feature in, I think, the piece she reads tonight. But also, let me just add that she has 2 books out and 1 coming. The books out are called Birds of a Lesser Paradise and Almost Famous Women. And coming next year, How Strange a Season. So happy to welcome Megan. Hello, Megan.
Thank you, Sven. I cry easily, so let me just kind of button myself back up. But first, thank you, Bill, Sven, and the Agni team for creating a space where we can all come together and attempt to make meaning of our messy lives. And thank you to Sven, in short, for just being bedrock for me in my literary endeavors. And I won't say more because I will cry. But it's always fantastic to come together either with people who like animals or like books. And I suppose any of you readers or writers are at least one of those. So I think we like each other already. I appreciate you being here to listen. And Erin and Rafael, just gorgeous work. Thank you for the literary work that you do and the work you do out in the world. I am typically a fiction writer or a journalist, and somehow came up with some sort of genre bending piece here that's, I would say, a bit of a memoir prose poem. So thank you to Agni for being open-minded in terms of genre. This is called Calling the Horses Home. The night the horse crossed the highway to eat from our apple tree, the threads that held my life together loosened. I walked the dogs and looked at the hoof prints in the cold October mud. Here was a new, strange world. My friend says we only pretend to have security in the face of terror, the horror of being human. She says we think of sex more than we have it, that we give it so little time with our bodies. The next morning, I went for a run to soothe myself and stumbled over a snake. His guts were hanging out of his body, a trail of bowels in the wake of a tire. He turned angrily toward me, opening his mouth wide, dislocating his jaws so he could swallow his pain, which became mine. I thought of the chocolate lab I saw once that had been hit by a truck in the middle of a highway. 4 men draped the suffering dog in a blanket and lifted his body into a car. Why do we wait until nothing more can be done? Now we are loose animals, aimless, like the herd of deer swimming out to sea, unsure of what we want, sinking with fatigue. This summer, I paused at an open metal mailbox, reaching inside only to find a nest of robins, already busy with dying, fetal skin and bulging eyes pulsing in the unbearable Carolina heat, baking, naked, alone. It seemed compassionate to let them finish. Today, I would bring my daughters back into my womb for safekeeping. I would re-engineer this life, call us home from the warm horizon, spit the apples from our mouths. I would walk it back and unfuck you, the world. Thanks. And sorry, Mom and Dad.
I am Deepaj Raman, a visual artist based in New Delhi, India. I like to do drawings, lots and lots of drawings. They are spontaneous, freehand, and I improvise it there and then. They are based on both random thoughts and well thought of thematic concerns. I would describe my works as an uneasy loop that is circling on facts and fiction. They are satirical, ironical. When you see them, they are dark, monochromatic, and unreal. But for me, they are absolutely real. This is my working space and has been like forever. My studio is also where I live, in my apartment. I share my works and process on social media platforms like an extended studio. Interactions, responses, and seeing one's own work from others' point of view. It's very interesting. And through these platforms, I also got the privilege to meet and work with talents I've admired. And it has helped me to become more aware of my works and explore zones which I haven't explored before. When I work on any drawing, a theme, or a project, the visual references are from my immediate surroundings. I draw them, I capture them in videos, photos, and include them in my works because then they feel more relatable, as in true to me. And this has also inspired me venturing into animating my drawings. These are the most basic but very important aspects of my process, my works.
Hi everyone, I'm Mary O'Donoghue. I'm fiction editor at AGNI, and I'm also speechless after that too short visit to Deepa's studio. Deepa, if you're in attendance, and certainly if you're watching the recorded version of this, we are so honored to have your work with us for this issue, and also to know that a couple hundred people possibly are looking at it with us tonight as well. So thank you for letting us visit your studio. We're also visiting another studio tonight, and I have the pleasure of bringing us part of the way in there. What many of you, most of you won't know is that I am a couple of streets away from the music that you heard Holland Hopson playing at the start of our evening. And I know that I heard it on the screen, but I'm imagining also that I heard it coming across town here in Tuscaloosa, where we both are. Holland Hopson is a composer, a sound artist, a musical artist, a professor in the field of arts entrepreneurship. He's also a maker of musical instruments. And I might describe him as Renaissance trending in the 21st century for all of those reasons. In addition to his musical performance for Agni this evening, there are other ways that I could imagine his work featuring in our journal. I'm thinking in particular of the artworks in his series called A Work of Art for Every Entry in the Index Subjects Library of Congress, which is an installation working with phrases from that library's database and designed, as he describes it, as an endless stream of possible art objects. They display one after another as note cards on a screen. Now, there's an algorithm involved, as there are in our lives constantly. But in this case, these algorithms and his design make sure that no two imaginary objects in this art installation are the same. All are original. Each is original. And if you're curious now, which you are, just wait until after our program this evening, and then you can go and look up his work, that very title. For now, please join me in welcoming him to Agni, to all of your screens and homes this evening. He's going to give us some more music. Welcome, Hopson, Holland.
Wow, that was like incredible music. Good evening, everyone. My name is Esteban Rodriguez, and I am the Associate Poetry Editor, and it is my honor to introduce W.S.D. Piero. W.S.D. Piero is the author of 13 collections of poetry, including The Dog Star, Nitro Nights, and Skirts and Slacks, which is absolutely one of my favorite poetry collections, and one that was highly influential as a young grad student seeking a voice that was authentic, relatable, and just plain real. W.S.D. Piero's poetry centers on memory and the experience of growing up in South Philadelphia, as well as the plights of everyday individuals and working class families. But at its core, his work seeks to illuminate what it means to be completely human and how one cannot live despite the odds, what one knows is coming. Di Piero was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2001, and he was awarded the Ruth Lilly Prize in 2012. It's a privilege to welcome to the virtual stage, W.S.D. Piero.
Thank you for that, Esteban. The Spanish poet and playwright Garcia Lorca, in 1929, spent several days in northern Vermont. In 1936, at age 38, back in Spain, he was executed by fascists. The title of this poem is Lorca at Eden Lake. What blue perfumes did you see in the first slow October snow? Your reckless heart in Yankee land, under the yellow tamaracks, that smell you taste of fall in summer, leaf piles burning, wood smoke, resins. The Vermont air inflames your ears. Time's sexual touch. Your footfalls quieter now on the broken weaves of needles dropping from trees. The frogs still sing their ballads at night. You could stage entertainments here, like the puppet plays you wrote back home. The scripts are simple. Punch whacks Judy. Judy shakes him by the throat. A Guardia squad crowds the wings. The soldiers point and jerk their guns when Punch swings his paddle at the sky. They shoot Punch dead. Judy cries, Will I not see him again? Oh, never? And in this one, I make mention of the great Irish poet, Patrick Kavanagh, author of the great poem, The Great Hunger. The title of this is To a Friend Sick Again. What does that mean, the fire in us? Say instead, the fire that we are in time. Taste flakes of charcoal stirred in water. Taste bread and wine. Already alive in fire are its embers, coals, and warm ashes. One knows what's coming, what has been. One covers the heart's orange char with leaves. As Odysseus washed ashore, covered himself, just as a certain tribe covers coals at night with leaves and next day blows on the embers, frees the flames. The tribe survives. Cover another day. Remember us on that broken sofa, reciting Kavanagh's Great Hunger? And to my awful question, who or what do we write for, or toward, or against? Your serene, fugitive response was God. Our molecular, chancy, saturate God. Blow on the coals, old friend, and make the next day real. One more day of desire. God lives in cells and bones and viruses. The dire, loving God who wants us to be completely human. We cry to be as complete in life as death someday will make us. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. Julian, fiction editor at AGNI, and it hardly seems a moment since the Voices of Our Nation summer workshop, where I had the distinct pleasure of sharing a table with Jamie Figueroa, although it must be 10 years now, I think, something like that. Yeah. I got to know her there, not only as a great writer, but as a warm, wise, deeply thoughtful and generous presence. And it's hard to quantify what I'm feeling right now. It's joy, but it's a lot more too, that I get to introduce Jamie tonight. It's the closing of a circle and the opening of one at the same time. So what is our spiritual inheritance from the generations that precede us? How do we pull from the darknesses of memory and of trauma, not just to discern the edges of our experience, but to transform it? Jamie Figueroa's debut novel, Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer, published by Catapult in March of this year, is a poetic, multi-voiced exploration of these questions. In her novel, and in the wonderful story she's granted to AGNI 93, like none other, her storytelling centers the body as a carrier of history, an archive, a source of deep knowing. She calls her first novel, quote, a love letter of sorts, an act of appreciation for this place that took me in and gave me all that I longed for. Well, that place is New Mexico, where Jamie currently calls home, and where she is an assistant professor of creative writing at the Institute of American Indian Arts. I am so pleased to welcome our final reader of the evening, Jamie Figueroa.
Thank you so much. That's lovely. So very lovely. And thank you to everyone at AGNI and to Bill as well. It's so heartening to know that Julia is at work in the literary world. Her brilliance and insight and talent is remarkable, and I imagine will be valued more and more and more in our literary community in years to come, for sure. I'm so grateful for our time together a decade ago, and that we continue. Also, thank you to everyone else who is a part of this issue. What a stunning and tremendous evening this has been. Thank you, Deepa, for your exquisite ink raptures, and thank you, Holland, for your sweet medicine. It's been truly wonderful to be here with you all this evening. So I will read from the beginning of this story, like none other, that Agni was gracious enough to include in this issue. 3 days after we moved in, we woke to rabbits in the yard. Instead of lean and large-footed creatures flecked with desert camouflage, black eyes tight and suspicious, ears vertical as if starched and pinned to the tops of their heads, they were, well, black and white and impossible, plump, with long shiny hair and red-eyed as if from an illustration in a children's book. A whole herd of them. A sign, said my daughter, Micah, mini carrots crayoned in each fist. She knelt on a box of books, books I might not live long enough to unpack. Her long legs evidence of a growth spurt at 15. 11, she chanted, as if she were about to launch into a nursery rhyme. 11. Surely someone will come for them, I said in her direction. She told me the previous night I wasn't allowed to look at her anymore. She told me that my staring was an oppressive force, a threat to her independence. Can't you see I'm not an extension of your body? She'd said. If you want to stare at someone, stare at yourself. What she did not say was, can't you see I'm not an extension of your sick body? We'd been unpacking the kitchen and I had too many plates in my arms. Trying to lift them into the cupboard made me shake, my weakness exposed. The overhead fixture was missing 2 out of its 3 light bulbs. We squinted into haphazardly marked boxes, trying to make sense of what the wads of packing paper contained. All around us, paper covered the floor. Am I supposed to answer that? I'd said. Isn't it obvious? I'd stopped pretending I knew how to respond to her months before I made the decision to move us 5 states west and a block away from her father, his second wife, their 3 children, their relatives, and all their relatives' relatives. Are you asking for my permission? Micah's strength was undiluted. I admired it. I told myself it would keep her from getting sick. I told myself it was better for her to be angry with me than grief-stricken. Anger was combustible, fuel for living. Lost, I said into the dust coating the screen door. I kept my focus on the rabbits, careful not to ignite Micah. Every one of you. Lost. Huddled among scrub grass, goat heads, dandelions, and mounds of pebbles, their velvet coats shone in the early morning sun. Each coat a different combination of black on white, excuse me, or white on black. Floppy ears folded along their sides, twitching noses tilted downward. Clearly, they were the kind that should have been kept in outdoor pens constructed for the purpose or else in the garage. Or inside the house altogether, sheltered. I was reminded of fat cats or cows grazing. I was reminded of what rabbits should look like. I thought, these are tame ornamental cousins, decorative homogeny. I wished for the days when I still believed in my ability to write poetry. I felt empty and suddenly missed being pretty more than I had let myself until then. I still had hair, the jagged tips of which frayed around my shoulders. To conceal the thinning patches on my scalp, I had tied a scarf around my head. The first time Micah saw me this way, she'd accused me of appropriation. Didn't everyone's ancestors have material they tied to their heads? I'd said, especially the women. Are you speaking from your particular ancestry or from your blanket whiteness? Micah said. The daughter I raised to be well-read, articulate, aware, my daughter. As dark as her father, her features an echo of his. No evidence of me at all. A sign, Micah said again, of the rabbits. Magic welcomes us. Her sword had turned into a wand. Instead of a warrior, she was a little girl again. She slipped around me and out the door. The rabbits lifted their heads, throbbing noses and bouquets of whiskers pointed in Micah's direction. They did not seem to know enough to run from her. Instead, they crept in closer, creating a crude semicircle, as if she were going to tell them a story. Sunlight illuminated the back of her. For early June, it seemed persistent and invasive, but this was the high desert, and we were at 7,000 feet. The hottest month, we were warned, until the rains came, if the rains came. I watched the eloquent curve of her long neck stretch forward. As she bent down and kneeled, the soles of her bare feet peeled away from the ground. Gym shorts folded over at her waist, tank top exposing midriff. All of her wet, dark hair secured to the top of her head, the expanse of her endless, healthy limbs exposed. I used to smell her before she could walk, and for years after, I'd plant my nose in her hair and in the crook of her neck. Just days ago, it seemed, I used to hold her feet and my hands as if they were bars of gold. You are made of gold, I'd say. How long would she hear my voice saying this? I didn't hear my mother or my grandmother, not anymore. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw them, an image of comfort and of death. Ours was a family inheritance the women carried, each daughter waiting her turn. Don't get bit. I heard his voice before I could see him, rounding the broken fence of our yard, a young man shorter than Micah. He was laughing at his own joke while she looked him up and down, flip-flops and a woven grass hat tied under his chin, white tracks of sunscreen marking his hairless jawline. They found you. Are they yours? Micah said. No, he said. They're yours. She turned toward the house, looked at the screen door I was leaning against. It wasn't protection she was after. It was simply closeness, though I knew she'd reject me if I got near. What? You don't want them? It was obvious he wanted to make her smile, but she refused to give him that gift. She'd make him work for it, like she did anyone who wasn't her father. Do they really bite? Her fists rose to her hips. He must have had an idea of what her stance meant because he held out his hand as if surrendering. Miguel, he said, de la Torre. I know what that means, she said. Bull. Is it that obvious? One side of her mouth began to creep its way up. Where'd they come from? She said, barely shaking his hand before letting it go. And you are living here now. She widened her stance. The rabbits? They're Pierre's rabbits, or they were. He's gone now, back to France, immigration or something. I don't know, but his girlfriend did this. Did what? Micah said. Freed them. He fiddled with the string under his chin. In spite of the heat, he'd left the sleeves of his blue linen shirt unrolled. The small buttons of his wrists were not fastened. Once a dress shirt, now a work shirt, I guessed. His pants, stained with dirt, were thinning at the knees. He ate them. What? She pulled her fists into her armpits, her arms a tight cross. Pierre, he ate them like chickens, he said, forcing a laugh. After he killed them, of course. Micah's face creased in horror. What do you mean? The rabbits chewed the carrots close to her feet. It's a French thing. He'd invite us over, me and my uncle and the Garcias and the Trujillos and the Apodacas. He pointed at various houses down the street, and even those Canadians that came a few years back. He paused, studying Micah's face. They tasted good. When I was young, we ate squirrel and rabbit. My mother gathered what she didn't grow, shot what she didn't harvest. She came from a long line of women from the woods, first Germany and then the Midwest. Women who could peel the hide from a four-legged animal, stew the meat, boil the bones. When I was a child, it was not uncommon for me to have to walk around a doe strung from the elm tree in the front yard, blood draining, soaking into the ground. She'd give me the rabbit's fluff of tail to rub between my fingers until eventually it would come undone, hair covering my palms. Once she was diagnosed, she stopped hunting. She died within the year. I never told Micah any of this, never took her into the woods, never showed her how to distinguish tracks. Instead, I taught her to question, to critique the weapons I'd learned in college, where I was the first to go. Thank you so much.
I wanted to encourage everybody to switch away from speaker view and to gallery view at the top right of their screens, and to look around at the audience. This is our subscribers, our newsletter readers, and the readers tonight who did such a great job and represent a phenomenal crew of writers who make up AGNI 93. And many of them are also in the audience, as well as writers from our earlier issues. And I specifically, when I was told I was muted, I was singling out Catherine Klusmeyer because she herself doesn't know this, and the rest of the Masthead doesn't know this, but she has just won a Pushcart Prize for Gutted, which is an essay that we published in AGNI 91. It was actually the first issue that we put together as a full current Masthead. So something we're very proud of, and she just got the, well, I just got the notice of that, and now I'm giving it to her and the rest of you. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to the National Endowment for the Arts for the support it gives us, to the Massachusetts Cultural Council, to the individual donors who support AGNI every year, to subscribers who order and read the magazine. That you can subscribe online if you haven't yet, to our newsletter readers, to my colleagues here at the magazine who make up this place and make doing this a joy for me, and just a big part of my social world, because they're such wonderful people, in addition to being such great editors and thinkers and writers themselves. So thank you very much, and have a good evening.